I got laid off on a Tuesday. Standard corporate stuff, nothing personal, just budget cuts. I had been working in IT support for 3 years. Decent enough job, paid my bills. Not glamorous, but stable. I called my parents that night to let them know, mostly just to vent. Dad said something about how I should have worked harder to make myself indispensable. Mom said she hoped this would be a wake-up call. I figured they were just being their usual selves, always pushing me to do more, be more, achieve more. I'm 28 years old and apparently that's still not old enough to be taken seriously by them. Thursday afternoon, my landlord texted me. Just a straightforward message saying he needed to talk. I called him back thinking maybe it was about the water heater that had been acting up. Instead, he told me that my brother Jacob had contacted him directly, offered him $500 to terminate my lease early and get me out within 48 hours. My landlord actually apologized, said he felt weird about it, but Jacob had been very insistent, and honestly, the money was good for what amounted to just filing some paperwork differently. He said I had until Saturday morning. I sat there staring at my phone, trying to make sense of what I just heard. My own brother paid my landlord to throw me out. I called Jacob immediately. He picked up on the second ring and I could hear him smiling through the phone. I asked him what the hell he thought he was doing. He actually laughed, like full-on laughed. He told me Mom and Dad had asked him to do it, said they were tired of me being a failure, that I needed tough love, that this was for my own good. He sounded so pleased with himself. I called my parents. Dad answered. I asked him if what Jacob said was true. He didn't even hesitate. He said yes, they loved me. But I needed to hit rock bottom before I would change. Said Jacob was helping facilitate that. I told him I had nowhere to go. Dad said that was the point. Mom grabbed the phone from him and told me that maybe a few nights on the street would motivate me to get my life together. Her exact words. A few nights on the street. I asked if I could stay with them, just until I figured things out. Dad took the phone back and said absolutely not. Said their house was for successful people only. That hurt more than I expected it to. Successful people only. Like I was some kind of contamination. My sister Loretta texted me an hour later. She had heard about the eviction. Said it was good, that I had been pathetic for too long. My brother sent me a laughing emoji. That was it, just the emoji. No words. I tried calling him back, but he had already blocked my number. Friday afternoon, I went to my apartment and found the locks had been changed. My landlord had been efficient. All my stuff was in the hallway, just piled up in boxes and garbage bags. My clothes, my laptop, my kitchen supplies. Everything just dumped there like trash. I loaded what I could into my 2009 Toyota Camry and drove to a parking lot. I sat there until it got dark trying to figure out what to do next. I had about $200 in my checking account. My savings had been depleted over the last few months when work had been slow, and I had been helping out with some family expenses. I slept in my car that night. It was uncomfortable and cold, and I barely slept. Saturday morning, I woke up to a parking ticket on my windshield. Apparently, I had parked in a spot that was permit only after 8 p.m. Great. I drove to a different lot and tried to figure out my next move. I needed to find a job, obviously, but that would take time. I needed a place to stay, but I couldn't afford first and last month's rent anywhere. I checked my phone and saw that the family group chat was active. They were planning a weekend trip to Napa Valley. Mom had sent photos of the hotel. Dad had posted about the wine tasting they had booked. Jacob and Loretta were discussing which restaurants to try. Nobody mentioned me. It was like I didn't exist. Sunday morning, my car got towed. I had unpaid parking tickets from months ago that I had been putting off dealing with. The tow truck driver was completely unsympathetic. He told me it would cost $450 to get my car back. I had $200. I asked if I could work out a payment plan. He said no. I watched him drive away with my car and everything I owned inside it. I walked to a McDonald's because it was the closest place with free Wi-Fi. I sat there with a cup of coffee I could barely afford and tried to think. My family had decided I was worthless. They had actively conspired to make me homeless. They were off enjoying wine country while I was sitting in a fast food restaurant with everything I owned locked in an impound lot. I could feel people staring at me. I probably looked exactly like what I was. Someone who had nowhere else to go. That's when I made the phone call. Just one call. I sat there in that McDonald's booth and I called my grandmother's lawyer. His name is Steven, and he's been handling my grandmother's estate since she passed away 4 years ago. Most people don't know this, but my grandmother left me her house. The house my parents live in. The house where I grew up. She left it to me specifically in her will because I was the one who took care of her during her last 2 years when she had cancer. I visited her every single day. I helped her with medications and appointments. I moved back home for those 2 years just to be there for her. My parents were busy, Jacob was in college, Loretta was working. So I did it. And when she died, she left me the house. The thing is, I never did anything with that information. My parents were already living there. It felt cruel to kick them out right after losing their mother, so I just let them stay. I never asked for rent. I never asked them to pay the property taxes. I paid those myself out of my salary. I never asked them to cover utilities or maintenance. I just took care of it all quietly because they were my parents and I loved them. I had the deed in my name, but I never mentioned it. I figured eventually I would have that conversation with them, but there was never a right time. And honestly, part of me just wanted them to appreciate what I was doing without me having to spell it out for them. Stephen answered on the third ring. I explained the situation to him. I told him about the layoff, about Jacob paying my landlord, about my parents refusing to help me, about sleeping in my car, about losing my car. I told him I needed to take action. He was quiet for a moment and then he said he understood. He said he had been wondering when I would finally do something about the house situation. He told me he could file eviction paperwork on Monday morning, standard 30-day notice. He said given that they had never paid rent and had no lease agreement, it would be straightforward. He asked if I was sure. I said yes. Then I asked him about something else, the family business. My father runs a small consulting firm. He does contract work for various companies, mostly logistics and supply chain stuff. It's not huge, but it pays well. What my parents don't talk about is that the business loan they took out 8 years ago to expand the company had me as a co-signer. I was 20 years old and Dad had convinced me it would be good for my credit. He said it was just a formality. I signed the papers without really understanding what it meant. That loan still has 3 years left on it, about $40,000 remaining. I asked Stephen what would happen if I wanted to separate myself from that loan. He said I could demand immediate repayment of my portion since I was a co-signer. He said if they couldn't pay, it would force them to refinance or potentially face default. He asked if I wanted to do that. I said yes. There was one more thing. My car was an impound, but technically it wasn't just my car. Jacob had co-signed the loan when I bought it 3 years ago because my credit wasn't great at the time. He had been helping me out, or so I thought. What he didn't know was that meant he was equally responsible for the loan. If the car stayed an impound and accumulated fees and I stopped making payments, it would tank his credit too. I asked Stephen if there was anything I could do about that. He said I could simply stop paying and let the consequences happen naturally. I told him I would think about it. Stephen said he would start the paperwork first thing Monday morning. He said I should prepare for my family to contact me once they received the eviction notice. He said they would probably be upset. I said I understood. I thanked him and hung up. I sat in that McDonald's for the rest of Sunday. I charged my phone. I used the bathroom. I ordered another coffee when the staff started giving me looks. I thought about everything my family had said to me over the past few days. Failure. Pathetic. Not successful enough for their house. Tough love. Rock bottom. I thought about my brother's laughing emoji. I thought about my sister saying I deserved this. I thought about my parents planning their wine country vacation while I was homeless. Monday morning, I was still sitting in that same McDonald's when my phone started ringing. It was Dad. I didn't answer. He called again. Then Mom called. Then Jacob. Then Loretta. Then Dad again. I watched the calls come in one after another. Text messages started flooding in. Dad saying we needed to talk immediately. Mom saying there had been a mistake. Jacob asking what the hell I had done. Loretta demanding I call her back right now. I finished my coffee. I watched through the window as a car pulled into the parking lot. Then another. Then 2 more. My entire family had driven to find me. I don't know how they knew I was at this particular McDonald's, but there they were. Dad got out of his car first. He looked different than I had ever seen him look before. Mom was right behind him. Jacob and Loretta pulled up 30 seconds later. They all stood in the parking lot looking around frantically. Dad had his phone pressed to his ear. Mom was scanning the area. I could see them through the window, all 4 of them together, looking for me with what I can only describe as panic. Dad spotted me through the glass. Our eyes met. He started walking toward the entrance. I stayed in my booth. I took another sip of my now cold coffee, and I waited for him to come inside and ask me the question I knew was coming. The question that would start a conversation 4 years in the making. The question that would make them finally understand exactly how badly they had miscalculated. Dad pulled open the door and walked straight to my booth. His hands were shaking. He looked at me and said we needed to talk right now. He asked me what I had done. I looked up at him and I smiled. Update 1. Okay, so the comments on my last post were insane. A lot of you called it. Yes, I had been planning this for a while. Not the specific timing, obviously. I didn't know I was going to get laid off, but the general idea of what I would do if my family ever pushed me too far. And paying my landlord to evict me while I was homeless definitely qualified as too far. So there I was in the McDonald's booth and Dad was standing there asking me what I had done. Mom, Jacob, and Loretta had followed him inside, and they were all just staring at me. I took my time finishing my coffee. I wanted them to sweat a little. Finally, I looked up at Dad and told him that I had contacted Stephen about Grandma's estate. The way his face changed was something I'll remember forever. He knew exactly what that meant. Mom started talking immediately. She said there had been a misunderstanding, that they were just trying to help me, that sometimes people need a push to reach their full potential. I asked her if paying someone to make me homeless was her idea of a push. She said it wasn't like that. Dad cut her off and said we needed to talk about this privately, not in a McDonald's. I told him we could talk right here or not at all, because I didn't have anywhere else to go since they had made sure of that. Jacob was the one who actually asked the direct question. He wanted to know if I had filed eviction paperwork. I said yes. 30-day notice. They had until the end of the month to get out of my house. Loretta actually laughed. She said I was being ridiculous, that I didn't even have a job. Where did I think I was going to live? I told her I was going to live in my house, the one Grandma left me, the one I had been letting them live in rent-free for 4 years. That's when things got heated. Dad said Grandma would never have wanted this. I reminded him that Grandma specifically left the house to me, not to him, because I was the one who took care of her when she was dying. I was the one who moved back home for 2 years to help her with everything while the rest of them were too busy with their own lives. Dad said that was my choice. I told him yes, it was my choice, and this was also my choice. Mom tried a different approach. She started crying. She said they were a family, and families don't do this to each other. I asked her if families pay landlords to evict their sons. She said that was different. That was meant to motivate me. I asked her how being homeless was supposed to motivate me. She didn't have an answer for that. Jacob was getting angrier by the second. He said I was being vindictive and petty. He said I was acting like a child who didn't get his way. I asked him if paying my landlord $500 to throw me out was mature adult behavior. He said I needed to learn to stand on my own 2 feet. I told him I would be standing in my own house while he figured out where he was going to live. Then I brought up the business loan. I told Dad that I had also instructed Stephen to send a formal demand for repayment of my portion of the co-signed loan, the $40,000 that was still outstanding. Dad's face went completely white. He asked me if I understood what that would do to his business. I said I understood perfectly. He said he couldn't just come up with $40,000 in 30 days. I told him that sounded like a problem he should have considered before deciding I wasn't successful enough to sleep under his roof. Mom grabbed Dad's arm. She was asking him what I was talking about, what loan, why hadn't he told her? Dad told her to be quiet. Jacob asked if I was seriously going to tank Dad's business over this. I asked him if he was seriously defending the people who made me sleep in my car. He said I was being dramatic. I reminded him that my car got towed Sunday morning and I had spent the night before sleeping in it. He said that wasn't their fault. I asked him who paid my landlord then. He went quiet. Loretta was on her phone. She looked up and said I couldn't actually do this, that there had to be laws against evicting family members. I told her she was welcome to look into it, but Stephen had already confirmed everything was legal. She called me a vindictive jerk. I told her she had texted me that I was pathetic and that the eviction was good for me. She said she didn't mean it like that. I asked her how else she could have possibly meant it. Dad tried to negotiate. He said if I dropped the eviction and the loan demand, he would help me get back on my feet. He would help me find a new apartment and even cover the first month's rent. I asked him why he wouldn't do that before. He said because I needed to learn responsibility. I told him I had been responsible enough to pay the property taxes on his house for 4 years without asking him for a dime. His mouth actually fell open. Mom asked what I meant by property taxes. I explained that as the homeowner, I was responsible for property taxes, and yes, I had been paying them this whole time, about $4,000 a year. That's when the math started hitting them. $4,000 a year for 4 years. $16,000 I had paid to let them live in my house, plus all the times I had helped with family expenses over the years, plus the risk I had taken co-signing their business loan when I was barely 20 years old. Mom sat down heavily in the booth across from me. She asked why I never said anything. I told her I thought it would be obvious. I thought they would appreciate it without me having to spell it out. Clearly, I was wrong. Jacob was doing something on his phone. He looked up at me and asked if I had stopped making payments on my car. I said I hadn't decided yet, but I was considering it since the car was an impound and I couldn't afford to get it out. He said if I stopped paying it would destroy his credit because he was a cosigner. I told him yes, that's generally how cosigning works. He started yelling. He said I was ruining his life over nothing. I told him he paid $500 to ruin mine, so we were at least in the same ballpark. The McDonald's manager came over and told us we needed to keep it down or leave. Dad apologized to him and then turned back to me. He said we needed to figure this out like adults. I told him I was open to discussions. He asked what I wanted. I said I wanted my house back and I wanted to be removed from his business loan. He said that was impossible in 30 days. I told him he should have thought about that before treating me like garbage. Mom was still crying. She kept saying this wasn't how she raised me. I reminded her that she told me to spend a few nights on the street to get motivated. She said she didn't think I would actually end up on the street. I asked her what she thought would happen when they paid someone to evict me while I had no job and no money. She didn't answer. Loretta said I was being cruel. She said Mom was clearly upset and I was just making it worse. I told her Mom had participated in making me homeless, so forgive me if I wasn't particularly concerned about her feelings. Loretta said I always played the victim. I asked her when exactly I had played the victim before this. She said I was always complaining about not being appreciated. I told her that maybe if they had appreciated me even a little bit, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Dad tried again. He said he could refinance the loan, but it would take time. He asked if I could give him 90 days instead of 30. I said no. He said I was being unreasonable. I said he was being evicted. There's a difference. He said the eviction would ruin them. I said paying my landlord to evict me had ruined me. So again we were even. He said it wasn't the same thing. I asked him to explain how it was different. He couldn't. Jacob brought up something I hadn't expected. He said if Dad's business went under, it would affect all of them. He said Dad employed several people, had contracts, had obligations. I asked him if he thought I didn't have obligations when they made me homeless. He said my situation was temporary. I asked him how he knew that. He said because I could just get another job. I reminded him I had just been laid off and finding a new job takes time. He said I should have been better prepared. I asked him if paying my landlord was his idea of preparing me. Mom asked if we could all just take a breath and discuss this calmly. I said I was perfectly calm. Dad said I clearly wasn't if I was doing this to them. I told him I was doing exactly what he had taught me to do, solving my own problems without asking for handouts. He said that wasn't what this was about. I asked him what it was about then. He said it was about me being spiteful. I said it was about me finally standing up for myself after years of being treated like the family disappointment. That hit something. Loretta said nobody thought I was a disappointment. I asked her why she texted me that I had been pathetic for too long then. She said she was just being honest. I told her so was I being honest right now. Jacob said I was confusing honesty with revenge. I asked him what he would call paying my landlord $500. He said it was intervention. I asked him to look up the definition of intervention because I don't think it meant what he thought it meant. Dad's phone rang. He looked at it and stepped away to answer. When he came back, he looked even worse. He said that was his business partner wanting to know why a lawyer had sent a formal demand for loan repayment. His business partner was asking if Dad was trying to dissolve the company. Dad told me I had just jeopardized his most important business relationship. I told him he had jeopardized our family relationship when he decided I wasn't successful enough to deserve basic shelter. Mom suggested family counseling. I actually laughed. I told her we were way past counseling. She said there had to be something I wanted that would make me stop this. I told her I wanted them out of my house and off my business loan. She said I was being stubborn. I said I was being consistent. Jacob said I was being impossible. I said they started it, and I was going to finish it. The thing is, I could see them starting to panic. Really panic. Dad kept checking his phone. Mom was crying harder now. Jacob was pacing. Loretta was still trying to find legal loopholes on her phone. They had thought this would be simple. They thought I would back down if they all showed up together. They thought I would feel guilty and give them more time. But I had been paying their property taxes for 4 years, and they had responded by paying my landlord to evict me. I was done feeling guilty. Dad asked one more time if we could negotiate. I said there was nothing to negotiate. The eviction was filed, the loan repayment demand was sent. He could try to refinance and find a new place to live, or he could face the consequences. Mom asked what about all the memories in that house. I told her Grandma's memories were what mattered, and she had wanted me to have it. Dad said I was twisting Grandma's intentions. I said I was honoring them. They left, eventually, all 4 of them walking out to the parking lot looking defeated. I sat there in the McDonald's for a while longer. My phone was buzzing constantly. Dad texting about family loyalty, Mom sending long messages about forgiveness, Jacob saying I had made a huge mistake, Loretta telling me I would regret this. But here's what they still didn't know. Stephen had told me something else when I called him. When Dad took out that business loan 8 years ago, he had listed the house as collateral. My house. The house he didn't own. The house Grandma had already put in her will to leave to me. Stephen said that was a potential fraud issue. He said if Dad defaulted on the loan, the bank would try to seize a house Dad didn't actually have legal right to use as collateral. He asked if I wanted to pursue that angle. I told him to keep it as backup information for now. And about Jacob's car loan situation. Stephen explained that if I stopped making payments and the car got repossessed, Jacob, as co-signer, would be responsible for the full remaining balance plus all the impound fees that were accumulating daily. That would be around $12,000 hitting his credit report. I hadn't decided what to do about that yet. I'm writing this from a public library now. Still no car, still technically homeless, still drinking terrible coffee and using free Wi-Fi. But for the first time in days, I don't feel like the failure they told me I was. I feel like someone who finally stopped letting people walk all over him. They have 28 days left to figure it out. The clock is ticking. And based on the 17 texts I've gotten in the last hour, they're starting to realize I'm not bluffing. Update 2. The comments telling me to stand firm have been really helpful. Some of you predicted exactly what happened next, and you were right. My family didn't take the eviction lying down. They got creative. And by creative, I mean they started trying every manipulation tactic they could think of. It's been 12 days since the McDonald's confrontation. Dad's business partner called me directly. I don't know how he got my number, but I suspect Dad gave it to him hoping it would help their situation. His name is Travis, and he's been working with Dad for 6 years. He wanted to meet in person to discuss the loan situation. I agreed to meet him at a diner on Thursday afternoon because I figured it would be interesting to hear what he had to say. Travis showed up looking stressed. He ordered coffee and got straight to the point. He said Dad had told him about the family situation and he understood there was conflict, but the loan demand was going to destroy the business. He said they had 3 active contracts worth over $200,000, and if they defaulted on the loan, they would lose everything. He asked if I understood that. I told him I understood perfectly. He said I was hurting more than just my dad. I asked him if he knew that my dad had paid someone to evict me while I was unemployed. He said yes, but that was between me and my family. I told him so was the loan. Travis tried a different approach. He said if the business went under, it would affect his family too. He had a wife and 2 kids. They depended on his income. I asked him why Dad hadn't thought about that before using me as a co-signer on a loan without any intention of treating me with basic respect. Travis said people make mistakes in family dynamics, but business was business. I told him he was right, and this was business. I was a co-signer demanding repayment. That was business. He asked if there was any amount that would make me reconsider. I said $40,000 would make me reconsider because that was what I was owed. He said he couldn't come up with that kind of money. I told him that wasn't my problem. Before he left, Travis said something that stuck with me. He said Dad had always talked about me like I was the problem child, the one who couldn't get his life together, the one who needed constant help. Travis said he had been shocked when Dad told him I owned the house and had been paying property taxes for years. He said that didn't match the picture Dad had painted at all. I told him no, it probably didn't. Travis said he thought Dad was ashamed. I asked him of what. Travis said ashamed that I had been the responsible one all along and he hadn't noticed. That same day, Mom called me. She wanted to meet for lunch on Saturday. I told her I couldn't afford lunch. She said she would pay. I met her at a casual restaurant near the library. She looked like she hadn't slept well. She ordered a salad and barely touched it. She started by apologizing. She said the eviction idea had been wrong, and she had realized that now. She said she had been listening to Dad too much about me needing tough love, and she should have stood up for me. I asked her why she didn't. She said because Dad was so certain it would help me and she trusted his judgment. I told her that was a choice she made and choices have consequences. Mom said they had been looking at apartments, but everything required first and last month's rent plus security deposit, and they didn't have that kind of money available. She said Dad's business was struggling because of the loan demand. I told her again that wasn't my problem. She said I was being cold. I reminded her she had told me to spend nights on the street. She started crying again. She said she never actually thought I would end up on the street. I asked her what she thought paying someone to evict me would do. She said she thought I would ask them for help and they would give it with conditions. I asked her what conditions. She said conditions like me taking their advice more seriously and working harder to be successful. I told her I had been working hard my entire adult life. She said not hard enough, apparently. That hurt more than I expected. I asked her what she meant. She said if I had been truly successful, I wouldn't have gotten laid off. I told her layoffs happen to everyone. She said they happen more to people who don't make themselves valuable. I asked her if she thought I wasn't valuable. She said she thought I could have been more valuable if I had listened to their advice over the years. I asked her what advice specifically. She said advice about networking, about ambition, about not settling for mediocre jobs. I told her I had liked my job and it paid my bills. She said that was exactly the problem. I was always just getting by instead of excelling. I realized something sitting there listening to her. She actually believed this. She genuinely thought I was a failure because I wasn't wealthy or impressive enough. It wasn't just about the eviction or the tough love. It was about their fundamental view of who I was. I asked her if she knew how much I made at my IT job. She said she didn't know exact numbers. I told her I had been making $58,000 a year. She said that wasn't very much. I asked her how much she thought it should be. She said at my age I should be making at least 80 or 90,000. I asked her based on what. She said based on Jacob making 95,000 in finance and Loretta making 82,000 in marketing. I told her different fields pay different amounts. She said that sounded like an excuse. Mom said if I dropped the eviction they would help me find a better job. Something in Jacob's field maybe. I told her I didn't want to work in finance. She said I needed to be more open-minded about opportunities. I asked her if she was actually hearing herself. She asked what I meant. I said she was sitting here trying to negotiate me, giving up my house in exchange for job hunting advice. She said she was trying to help our family. I told her the family hadn't helped me when I needed it. She brought up Grandma. She said Grandma wouldn't have wanted us fighting like this. I told her Grandma left me the house specifically, and there was a reason for that. Mom said Grandma was old and confused at the end. I asked her if she was seriously suggesting Grandma didn't know what she was doing when she made her will. Mom said Grandma always favored me. I asked her why she thought that was. Mom said because I manipulated her by being there all the time during her illness. I stood up. I told Mom this conversation was over. She grabbed my arm and said we weren't finished. I pulled away and told her yes, we were. Jacob texted me Sunday night. He said we needed to talk about the car situation. I called him. He said the impound fees were up to $800 now and climbing every day. He said if I didn't get the car out soon, it would be sold at auction and we would both be liable for the remaining loan balance. I told him I was aware of how impound lots worked. He said I needed to figure something out. I asked him why I needed to figure it out. He said because it was my car. I reminded him he was a co-signer, which meant it was his responsibility too. He said he only co-signed to help me out. I told him he also paid my landlord to evict me, so his helpfulness was clearly selective. Jacob said I was being irrational. He said he had apologized for the eviction thing, and I needed to move past it. I asked him when he had apologized. He said he had implied it. I told him implications weren't apologies. He said I was being pedantic. I said I was being precise. He asked what I wanted from him. I said I wanted him to take responsibility for his choices the same way I was taking responsibility for mine. He said his choice to help with my car loan was before any of this. I told him exactly, and I had helped with the house and property taxes before any of this too. But that didn't stop him from throwing me out. Jacob tried to make a deal. He said if I dropped the eviction, he would handle the car situation. I asked him how. He said he would pay to get it out of impound, and we could work out a payment plan for me to pay him back. I told him I didn't want to owe him anything. He said I was being stubborn. I told him I was being smart. He said the car was going to get sold and tank both our credit scores. I said that was unfortunate for both of us then. He actually screamed at me through the phone. He said I was ruining his life over nothing. I told him evicting someone isn't nothing. He said I had turned one mistake into a war. I told him he started it and I was finishing it. Wednesday, I got a message from Loretta. She wanted to meet at a Target near where she worked. I went there after spending the morning at the library applying for jobs. She was waiting in the parking lot. She said she wanted to talk without everyone else around. We sat in her car. She said Mom and Dad were a mess. They had found an apartment, but it was small and expensive, and they were going to have to get rid of most of their furniture. She said Dad's business was barely staying afloat. She said Jacob was panicking about his credit. She said all of this was my fault. I asked her how it was my fault. She said because I had the power to stop it and I wasn't. I asked her why I should stop it. She said because they were family. I asked her if family pays landlords to evict each other. She said they had made a mistake, but I was making it worse. I asked her if she remembered texting me that I had been pathetic for too long. She said she was angry when she sent that. I told her so was I angry now. She said it wasn't the same thing. I asked her to explain the difference. She couldn't. Loretta said I was enjoying this. She said I liked watching them struggle. I told her I didn't enjoy it, but I wasn't going to stop it either. She asked what that meant. I said it meant they created this situation and they could deal with the consequences. She said the consequences were too severe. I asked her if making me homeless wasn't severe. She said that was temporary. I asked her how she knew that. She said because I could have asked them for help. I reminded her I did ask them for help and Dad said no because their house was for successful people only. She said Dad didn't mean it like that. I asked her how else he could have meant it. Loretta told me something I hadn't known. She said Jacob had put the $500 for my landlord on a credit card because he didn't have the cash available. She said he was already carrying a balance and now he couldn't make his minimum payments because Dad's business wasn't doing well, and Dad had been helping Jacob with some of his expenses. I asked her why Dad was helping Jacob if Jacob made $95,000 a year. She said Jacob had a lot of expenses. I asked her what kind of expenses. She said rent and car payments and student loans and going out and traveling. I told her those were called living beyond your means. She said I didn't understand their lifestyle. I asked her what lifestyle. She said they had standards to maintain. I told her I had standards too, and one of them was not being homeless. She said I was never actually homeless. I asked her where she thought I had been sleeping. She said she assumed I had friends. I told her I had been sleeping in my car until it got towed, and then I had been sleeping in the library parking lot in my sleeping bag. She looked shocked. She said she didn't know that. I asked her what she thought happened to people who get evicted with no money and no place to go. She said she hadn't really thought about it. Loretta asked if I would consider a compromise. She said, what if they paid me rent for the house and I dropped the loan demand? I asked her how much rent. She said maybe $1,000 a month. I told her property taxes alone were over $300 a month plus. I had been covering maintenance and repairs. I told her market rent for that house would be at least $2,500 a month. She said they couldn't afford that. I told her then they couldn't afford to live there. She said, I was being unreasonable. I said, I was being a landlord. She tried one more thing. She said, what about family dinners and holidays and birthdays? She asked if I really wanted to miss all of that. I told her they hadn't invited me to their Napa Valley trip. She said that was before all this. I said exactly so. They had already excluded me before I did anything. She said they had planned that trip months ago. I asked her why they didn't cancel it when I got laid off. She said because they had already paid for it. I told her they had $500 to pay my landlord but couldn't offer me anything when I lost my job. She said those were different things. I asked her how. She didn't answer. The eviction is in 16 days. Dad texted me this morning saying the bank had called him about the house collateral issue. Apparently, Stephen had sent them documentation showing the house wasn't actually Dad's to use as collateral. Dad said this was going to trigger a loan review and potentially acceleration of the entire loan amount. He said I had just destroyed everything he had built. I didn't respond. I'm still at the library most days. I've had 2 job interviews. One of them went well, and they said they would let me know next week. I'm still sleeping in my sleeping bag in various parking lots. It's getting old, but I'm managing. Some of you asked if I felt guilty. I don't. Every time I think maybe I'm being too harsh, I remember Mom telling me to spend nights on the street and Dad saying his house was for successful people only, and Jacob's laughing emoji and Loretta's text calling me pathetic. I remember 4 years of paying property taxes on a house I let them live in for free. I remember being 20 years old and signing a business loan I didn't understand because Dad said it would help the family. They're running out of time and they're getting desperate. I can feel it in every text message and every attempted negotiation. They thought I would break. They thought family loyalty or guilt or fear would make me back down. They were wrong. I've been planning this for 4 years every time I paid those property taxes and got 0 acknowledgement. Every time they made comments about my career or my lifestyle or my choices. Every time they made me feel like I wasn't good enough. This wasn't a sudden decision in a McDonald's. This was 4 years of building up to the moment when they would finally push too far. And they did. And now they're finding out what happens when you treat someone like garbage and then discover they hold all the cards. 16 days left. I'm counting down. Final update. This is it, the last update. A lot of you have been following this and asking what happened, so here's how it all ended. The eviction deadline was yesterday, 30 days exactly from when Stephen filed the paperwork. I got the job I interviewed for. IT support position at a mid-sized company starts next Monday. Pays $62,000, which is actually more than my last job. I spent the last week of the eviction period getting ready to move into my house. My house. Still feels weird to say that. 5 days before the deadline, Dad called me. He asked if we could meet one more time. I told him we could meet at the house since it was going to be mine soon anyway. He said that was cruel. I said it was practical. We met there on a Friday evening. Mom was there too. They had been packing and the house looked chaotic with boxes everywhere and furniture tagged with colored stickers. Dad started by saying they had found an apartment. 2-bedroom, about 40 minutes away. Rent was $1,900 a month. He said it was all they could afford. He said his business partner Travis was trying to keep things running, but the loan situation had spooked their biggest client. They had lost a contract worth $80,000. Dad said if I didn't drop the loan demand, the business would be finished within 6 months. I asked him if he had secured refinancing. He said no bank would give him a new loan with the current financial situation. I told him that sounded difficult. He said I was destroying his life's work. I said he had destroyed my sense of family when he paid someone to make me homeless. Mom tried to talk to me. She said they had made mistakes, but this punishment didn't fit the crime. I asked her what would fit the crime. She said maybe I could have been angry for a while and then forgiven them. I told her forgiveness required remorse, and I hadn't seen any actual remorse. She said they had apologized multiple times. I asked her to show me one apology that didn't include the word but. She couldn't. Dad said he was sorry about how things happened, but I had to understand they thought they were helping. I pointed out he just did it again. He said I was being impossible. I asked them a question I had been thinking about. I asked why they really thought I was such a failure. Dad said they never said I was a failure. I reminded him about the successful people only comment. He said he was upset when he said that. I told him upset people tell the truth. Mom said they just wanted more for me. I asked what more meant. She said they wanted me to have ambition and drive. I told them I had ambition and drive, but I also had realistic expectations about career progression. Dad said realistic was just another word for settling. I asked him if he thought working in IT support was settling. He said compared to what I could have done, yes. I asked him what he thought I could have done. He said anything if I had applied myself. I told him I had applied myself and this was the result, and it had been good enough until they decided it wasn't. Here's what I learned in that conversation. They didn't see me as a failure because of anything specific I did or didn't do. They saw me as a failure because I wasn't impressive enough to brag about. Jacob worked in finance and made good money so they could tell people about his success. Loretta worked in marketing for a recognizable company so they could mention that casually at parties. I worked IT support, which sounded boring and paid okay, but not great. Mom actually said this. She said when people asked about me, she never knew what to say that sounded interesting. I told her she could have said her son was a good person who took care of his grandmother and paid his bills and helped his family. She said that wasn't the same thing. I asked what it wasn't the same as. She said it wasn't the same as being proud of me. That broke something in me. Not in a sad way, in a clarity way. I realized they would never see me as enough because their measure of enough had nothing to do with who I actually was. It was about how I made them look to other people. I told them this. Dad said I was psychoanalyzing them. I said I was just repeating what Mom had said. He told me I was twisting her words. I asked Mom if I was twisting her words. She said I was making it sound worse than she meant. I asked her how she meant it. She said she meant that she wished she had more to tell people about me. I asked her why what she told people mattered more than what I actually did with my life. She didn't answer. The conversation went in circles for another hour. They wanted me to give them more time. I said no. They wanted me to reduce the loan demand to something manageable. I said the full amount or nothing. They wanted me to at least let them store furniture in the garage. I said no. Dad accused me of enjoying their suffering. I told him I wasn't enjoying it, but I wasn't stopping it either. Mom said I had changed into someone she didn't recognize. I told her I had always been this person, I just never had a reason to show it before. Jacob showed up while we were still there. He said he needed to talk to me about the car. I told him the car had been sold at auction 3 days ago. His face went white. He asked why I didn't tell him. I said I didn't think I needed to since he was a co-signer and should have been tracking it himself. He asked how much we owed. I told him the car sold for $3,500 and the loan balance was $9,800. So we each owed $2,650 plus his half of the impound fees, which were another $400. He asked if I was going to pay my portion. I said eventually, but I had other priorities first, like security deposit for my house. He said my house was their house. I corrected him. My house was my house and they were being evicted from it. Jacob lost it. He started yelling about how I had ruined everything for everyone. He said Dad's business was failing. Mom was having anxiety attacks. Loretta was stressed about family drama. And now his credit was going to be destroyed. He said all of this was because I couldn't handle a little tough love. I asked him if paying someone to evict me was a little tough love. He said compared to what I was doing to them, yes. I told him the difference was they did it first and I was just responding. He said I was responding with nuclear weapons. I said don't start fights you can't finish. Loretta came by on moving day itself. She didn't come inside. She stood in the driveway and watched the moving truck load up their furniture. She asked me if I was happy now. I told her I wasn't happy or sad, I was just done. She said I had torn the family apart. I asked her if the family was together when they paid my landlord or when they went to Napa Valley without mentioning me or when they told me their house was for successful people only. She said those were individual moments. I told her so was this. She said this had ongoing consequences. I said so did homelessness. She called me heartless. I told her she had texted me that I was pathetic, so her judgment of my character meant nothing. The moving truck left around 3 p.m. Dad and Mom stood in the empty living room. Mom was crying. Dad looked older than I had ever seen him look. He asked me one final time if there was anything that would change my mind. I said no. He asked what happened to family loyalty. I told him he should have thought about that before deciding I wasn't successful enough to deserve basic compassion. Mom said they would have helped me eventually. I asked her when eventually would have been. She said after I learned my lesson. I asked what lesson. She said the lesson that life is hard and you have to fight for what you want. I told her I was fighting for what I wanted right now. Dad said this wasn't what she meant. I said I knew exactly what she meant. They left around 4. I watched them drive away in Dad's car with the last of their personal items. Then I walked through the house. My house. It was empty and quiet, and it smelled like cleaning products from where they had scrubbed everything before leaving. I sat on the floor in the living room where I used to sit with Grandma during her last months. I thought about all the conversations we had there. She told me once that people show you who they are, and you should believe them. She said her biggest regret was not believing people the first time they showed her their true nature. I asked her why she was telling me this. She said because she could see I was the kind of person who wanted to believe the best in people, even when they showed you otherwise. She said that was a good quality, but it could also hurt me if I wasn't careful. I was careful this time. I believed them when they showed me I wasn't good enough for them. I believed them when they decided I needed to be homeless to learn a lesson. I believed them when they chose a wine country vacation over checking if I was okay. I believed them when Mom said she wished she had something more impressive to tell people about me. I believed all of it, and I acted accordingly. Stephen called me that evening. The loan demand had been officially processed. Dad had 30 days to pay $40,000 or face default. Stephen said Dad's business partner Travis had contacted him about negotiating a settlement. I asked what kind of settlement. Stephen said Travis wanted to buy out my portion of the cosigner obligation for $25,000. I asked if that was legal. Stephen said yes if all parties agreed. I thought about it. I told Stephen to tell Travis I would accept $30,000. Stephen said Travis might not agree. I said then Dad could come up with $40,000. 2 days later, Travis agreed to $30,000. The money hit my account yesterday. I used part of it to pay off my portion of the car debt, so Jacob couldn't come after me for it. He's still on the hook for his half plus his portion of the fees. I used the rest to furnish my house and build an emergency fund. I start my new job Monday, like I said. Dad texted me this morning. He said I had gotten what I wanted and I should be satisfied. He said they were living in a cramped apartment and struggling to pay rent. He said his business was hanging on by a thread. He said Mom was barely speaking to him because she blamed him for pushing the tough love idea. He said Jacob's credit score had dropped 120 points. He said Loretta wasn't talking to any of them because she was tired of the drama. He said I had destroyed the whole family. I read the message and I put my phone down and I went back to arranging furniture in my living room. Some of you have asked if I feel guilty. I don't. Every time I think maybe I went too far, I remember sitting in that McDonald's with $200 and nowhere to go while they planned a wine vacation. I remember Mom saying a few nights on the street would motivate me. I remember Dad saying his house was for successful people only. I remember Jacob's laughing emoji. I remember Loretta's text calling me pathetic. I remember 4 years of property taxes I paid without acknowledgement. I remember being 20 years old and signing loan papers I didn't understand because Dad said it would help the family. They treated me like garbage because I wasn't impressive enough for them. They decided I needed to hit rock bottom to learn a lesson. They paid someone to evict me while I was unemployed. They chose a vacation over their son. They made every single choice that led to this moment. I just enforced the consequences of those choices. Someone in the comments on my first post said that sometimes the trash takes itself out, but sometimes you have to take the trash out yourself. That stuck with me. My family had been treating me like trash for years in small ways, and then one big way. I took myself out of their lives, and in doing so, I took out the trash that was their treatment of. They can live in their cramped apartment and struggle with their reduced income and deal with their damaged relationships. Those are the natural consequences of their actions. I'm sitting in my house right now. My grandmother's house. My house. I have a job starting Monday that pays more than my last one. I have $30,000 in the bank after expenses. I have a home that nobody can take from me. I have no family left, but honestly, I'm not sure I ever really had one to begin with. What I had was people who kept me around as long as I was convenient and discarded me the moment they decided I wasn't living up to their standards. The eviction is complete. The loan is resolved. The car situation is handled. This chapter is closed. They know where I live if they ever want to have a real conversation about what they did and actually take responsibility without any buts. I'm not holding my breath, but I'm also not losing sleep over it anymore. To everyone who followed this saga and told me to stand firm, thank you. You were right. They tested me thinking I would break and I didn't. They thought family meant I owed them endless chances and forgiveness. They were wrong. Family is supposed to mean something more than shared genetics, and I finally figured that out. That's it. That's the end of the story. My family paid my landlord to evict me because they thought I was a failure. By the time they realized I wasn't, it was too late to undo what they had started.